Hello, Stephan here with Liquidity with a video about when to use the accusative case and when to use the dative case with the German prepositions in, über, and auf.
Liquidity.
German prepositions take specific cases, depending on the preposition and depending on the grammatical circumstances. Certain prepositions take one specific case. For instance, the preposition mit goes with the dative case. So mit, which means with, could be used in this sentence. Ich gehe mit dem Hund. I'm going with the dog. The opposite of mit would be ohne, without, and that one happens to take the accusative case. So I could say, ich gehe ohne den Hund. I'm going without the dog, which outrages the dog, but that's another topic. Some prepositions also take the genitive case. There are not very many of those, but there are a few. One example of that would be aufgrund. Aufgrund means literally on grounds of or because. So for instance, I could say, aufgrund des schlechten Wetters gehe ich nicht spazieren. On grounds of the bad weather or because of the bad weather, I'm not going for a walk. Some prepositions take either the dative or the accusative case, depending on the grammatical circumstances. Common examples of such prepositions are über, which means roughly over, in, which means more or less in, and then auf, which more or less means on. With these prepositions, when a stationary situation is described, the dative case is required with the noun or pronoun that follows. And by stationary, I don't mean necessarily standing still, but maybe just moving about in a certain area, such as circling, such as loitering, such as milling about in one specific area. So not going in a certain direction. In a situation that describes a directional movement from point A to point B, the accusative case is used. Let's start with the preposition über, which more or less translates as over into English. And that one is a little bit trickier, so let's go into a little bit more depth with this one. I'm going to use two nouns, one masculine and one feminine. Der Fluss, the masculine one, that just means the river. And the feminine noun that I'm going to use is die Brücke, the bridge. Let's use some stationary situations first, the types that take the dative case. So, for instance, I could say, die Brücke steht über dem Fluss. The bridge stands over the river. In this case, the bridge is constructed in such a way that it is situated in a static way over the river. It's not moving. This is where it's located. Let's look at another example. Ich stehe über dem Fluss. You could actually add to this one, ich stehe auf der Brücke über dem Fluss. In both cases, with über and auf, we have a static situation, so we have the dative case in both of these. So, ich stehe auf der Brücke über dem Fluss means I stand, or I am standing on the bridge over or above the river. So I'm not moving, I'm just located above or over the river. Third example is a little bit trickier because here we actually have a movement, but we have a stationary type movement. We have actually a bird circling. Der Vogel kreist über dem Fluss. That means the bird is circling over the river or above the river. So the bird's not going from point A to point B, but it's actually kind of loitering, kind of staying put within a certain area. It's not going outside of that area. It just mills around in that area, so to speak. Let's look at examples of directional movement with our bridge here. So for instance, I could say, die Brücke geht über den Fluss. The bridge goes over the river. So here I could argue, well, yes, it goes. We have a verb that implies a movement, but isn't the bridge stationary? Well, in this case, it is implied that the bridge actually spans from one shore to the other shore of the river. So in this case, even though we don't have literally a movement, we still have a direction from point A to point B. The bridge spans over the river. Next example. Die Brücke wird über den Fluss gebaut. The bridge is being built over the river. So here again, we have a direction from point A to point B, from shore to shore, right? The next example is a little bit more straightforward. Ich gehe über den Fluss. Maybe über die Brücke, you could add that here. I am going over the river, over the bridge, by means of the bridge maybe, right? So this one is really straightforward. I'm going over the bridge from one shore to the other one. I'm crossing the river, point A to point B. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's look at our bird again. So our bird is no longer circling, but it is actually crossing the river. So in German, I would say, der Vogel fliegt über den Fluss. Literally, that means the bird is flying over the river. In English, I would probably translate that with the bird is crossing the river. The prepositions in and auf are a little bit more straightforward, so I'm just going to give you a couple examples here. So, for instance, I could say, ich stehe im Fluss. I'm standing in the river. You may wonder why it is im here instead of in dem. You could say in dem, but typically, Germans almost always contract in and dem to im. So if you say words like im, zum, those are contractions of in dem, an dem, or zu dem. Let's use an example with auf. Ich bin auf der Brücke. I'm standing on the bridge. So another dative construction here. In both of these situations, I'm clearly in a stationary situation where I would need the dative case. Okay, let's look at two examples with the accusative case. So I could say, ich gehe in den Fluss. I'm going or I'm walking in or into the river. So again, I have a direction here where I'm maybe on the shore and I want to walk into the river for whatever reason. So this one would need the accusative case because I have a directional movement situation. Let's use an example with auf. Ich gehe auf die Brücke. I'm going or I'm walking on the bridge or onto the bridge, I would say, in English. So the into and onto also have that directional movement implied. Both of these situations, because I have directional movement, require the accusative case. I can think of at least one idiomatic expression that uses the preposition auf that might be cause for confusion here, because it is actually a combination of stehen and auf, which sounds quite stationary. And if I actually said that someone or something is standing on somebody, literally, I would actually have to use dative case. However, if I use the idiomatic expression, which means to be really attracted or to have a crush on someone maybe, or to be really into something or into someone, then I would need to use the accusative case. So don't let that one confuse you. Thanks for watching. Danke fürs Zuschauen. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and check out my other videos if you see videos that you like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so yet.